It's one of the many puzzling aspects to this conflict. Fighters, though, say Bin Jawad is only a temporary hold-up. They are preparing to take the fight onwards through Sirte, then Misrata, and then finally Tripoli. No one here, however, predicts what tomorrow may bring. Tony Bertley, AlJazeera, near Bin Jawad, north-central Libya.
Well, Fadel Laman is the president of the American Libya Council. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Fadel Laman, thank you for being with us. What can you tell us about what you understand about the state of play right now? It does seem as if Mr. Gaddafi is stepping up his actions.
Well, I mean, that's something that was expected. You wouldn't think. He was very clear in his speeches that he will do whatever he needs to do to hold on to power, and he will burn the country down if he needs to. And I think we'll start seeing some of his desperate moves, and we will not be surprised. He start using the Air Force. Scarcely, but he will use it more, and all this high-tech weapon will be used.
We've seen plenty of evidence of him using the Air Force already, but you're calling it desperate. It seems to us as if it's being successful.
Well, I think desperate in the fact that he could not find any other way of dealing with. He is on the defense. He's defending Sirte. I mean, Sirte is considered one of his strongest. Where his strongest allies, his tribe, and where he was born. I think losing Sirte would have been a complete embarrassment that may cause a defection of whatever left in his troops. So he had to draw the line, and that's what we saw. He drew the line in Sirte, and that's why he attacked Bin Jawad.
It seems you're suggesting that you still think that the protest movement has the upper hand. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's going back and forth. I think as it will drag on, will continue. I think the rebels or the opposition forces will be more organized, and I think they will rethink some of their strategies.
The strategy of Mr. Gaddafi and his foreign minister seems to include a slightly more sophisticated PR mechanism. What he's done is he's reached for the old excuse that many in the West have done, and that is to say we are being attacked by terrorists and that we need to take defensive action as a consequence. It's a comment that was repeated by the foreign minister. This is what he had to say.
Go back to your files and you will find they were in Guantanamo, and now they're fighting in the eastern part of Libya. This group lives in the same region. I'm telling you, there is Al-Qaeda. This is clear evidence. Their files are in Guantanamo.
Gaddafi has also suggested that if Israel is allowed to get away with killing people in Gaza, then why are people complaining about him taking defensive action, as he keeps characterizing it, in his own country? Do you think these arguments are winning any friends?
No, I think everybody knows that he's propaganda. He's trying to rebuild his propaganda network, and I think the message is very simple, and I think it was used in different forms, used by the Mubarak when he said the Islamists are going to come if I leave, and that fear tactics, I think the West understood it very well, and I don't think they take it seriously. Are there Islamists there? I'm sure there are, like in every country, but the majority of the people are nationalists who are trying to take back their own country from a dictator.
Fadel Laman, we will leave it there. Thank you for talking to us. Now, Barack Obama has repeated that the United States is still considering military options in response to the crisis in Libya. For more on that story, let's cross to Shihab Ratanzi in Washington. Shihab.
Thanks, Taimur. The US president said any action would be in response to what he called unacceptable violence carried out by those who supported the Gaddafi regime. On Thursday, NATO's defense ministers will meet in Brussels to discuss implementing a no-fly zone. That meeting after the group launched 24-hour air surveillance of Libya on Monday. But as Patty Culhane reports, the US is still exploring its non-military options.
As the constant gun battles rage, the back and forth for control of a country, and Libyans die in numbers not yet known, the U.S. president sends a message.
We stand for democracy, we stand for an observance of human rights, and that we send a very clear message to the Libyan people that we will stand with them.
But the bigger question for these fighters is how will the U.S. stand with them and when?
I wouldn't characterize the likelihood of further options being pursued as greater now, but we have said from the beginning that those options were on the table, and none of them have been removed from the table.
There's been a lot of talk about this so-called table, so let's take a look at what is supposedly on it. One option, instituting a no-fly zone. That's what the U.S. Senate is pushing for, but the U.S. military has pushed back, saying it would be complicated and would require military strikes. Obama administration officials say the U.S. is considering it, but only if other nations agree. Another option being talked about by some politicians, giving weapons to the rebels.
It would be premature to send a bunch of weapons to a post office box in eastern Libya. We need to not get ahead of ourselves in terms of the options we're pursuing.
The administration says it wants to know more about the rebels first and adds sending weapons is not currently allowed under the existing UN sanctions. But those sanctions could be changed or the weapons could be sent covertly. Another option, slightly more subtle, could be electronically jamming the Libyan government's communication systems. That will reportedly be talked about, but that's not been agreed to. The other option, humanitarian assistance. This seems to be where the Obama administration is putting much of its focus, agreeing to give another $15 million to aid groups Monday. Some experts predict that will be the extent of what the U.S. will be willing to do.
And it'll lean much more toward humanitarian assistance, like helping the refugees, for example, providing food, rather than actually using military force to attack Gaddafi.
The U.S. president can hear the cries for help from the battlefields. Feel the push from the politicians, even in his own party. But in the end, only he can answer the question, what is the U.S. willing to do? Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Al Jazeera has confirmed that the French and British missions to the UN are working on a draft resolution that would lead or could lead to the creation of a no-fly zone over Libya. Earlier, a US government spokesman said it supports the move. On Monday, too, the group of 6 Gulf Arab states, known as the Gulf Cooperation Council, issued a statement calling on the Security Council to, quote, protect Libyan civilians, including through a no-fly zone. Some human rights groups are also calling for a no-fly zone to be brought in as soon as possible because of humanitarian concerns. Joining us now from New York is Gabor Rona, International Legal Director of Human Rights First. I mean, we've been through the arguments against a no-fly zone several times on our air. It may discredit the rebels. There's no such thing as just having a no-fly zone. It involves quite a substantial military intervention, and indeed, it may make Colonel Gaddafi lash out even more against the rebels. So why are you still for it?
There's been a demonstrated need. There can be legal authority if the Security Council authorizes it, and there is local support within Arab nations for the no-fly zone. These are the 3 essential elements. It has been demonstrated that the Gaddafi regime has been systematically engaged in widespread, systematic abuses of its civilian population, massacres of civilians. These are not circumstances that the international community can afford to let go by. The establishment of a no-fly zone is not a panacea. It will not solve all problems, but it will prevent the Gaddafi administration